Well, thank you very much for having me tonight, everybody. Thank you, Maxine, for that introduction. I'm not Rupert Lowe, by the way. My name's Charlie Downs. I'm the National Campaigns Director and Spokesman for Restore Britain. And I was worried that I was going to be late tonight because I had to stop to fill up my car, which is something that I've been putting off for quite some time. Because the cost of diesel, because I drive a diesel in the year of our Lord 2026, is £2 a litre, or at least that's what it was when I filled up. And the experience of putting 30 quid into a petrol pump to fill up my tank to just under halfway, to me, encapsulated where we are as a nation today. Which is to say, things that were once unimaginable, things that were, that you just assumed would be affordable and accessible, no longer are. We're approaching a situation where the fundamentals of our society are in question. And that's obvious to all of us on a day-to-day basis, and increasingly an hour-to-hour basis, at the very immediate level. Whether it is the cost of fuel, whether it's the cost of food, whether it is the cost of electricity and gas, or whether it is the cost of tax. All of these things have become a crushing burden on all of us, and it is increasingly inescapable wherever you live in the country. This is to say nothing of the cost of housing, which was once a given, the idea that you would own a house as an Englishman in Britain. Certainly my parents' generation, it was not viewed as being some great achievement to own your own home in this country, but today, it is. Today we find ourselves in a situation where the great majority, certainly of young people, regard owning their own home as a distant prospect. And what does that say about how we've been governed? What does that say about where we are as a nation, when we cannot even provide something as fundamental as housing, owning your own property, which is so foundational to a stable and cohesive society? We can no longer guarantee that for our young people. And there's a great many other things like this, which we all, as I say, experience in our day-to-day lives. But this is just the most immediate layer of the crisis that our country finds itself in. Because underneath that, there is decades of mismanagement and betrayal and treason, in my view, by our governing class. And regardless of whether we elect the Reds or the Blues or the Turquoises now, regardless of who we elect, it feels as though this decline is unstoppable. And it feels as though nothing really changes. I grew up in Tony Blair's Britain. I was born in 2001. And so this version of Britain, characterised by decline, is the only version of Britain that I and my peers have ever known. We've never known a Britain other than this one, this multicultural economic zone, without much in the way of identity or self-confidence. And as I say, regardless of who we vote for, certainly for my entire life, it feels as though the same people are ultimately running the show. And that is because we are governed by a class who, regardless of which party they belong to, are all fundamentally the same. They're all of the same stripe. They are all from the same kind of background. And this is a talking point that is traditionally associated with the left. But it has become undeniable, in my view, that democracy in this country is essentially a sham. We try to make our voices heard at the ballot box, because that is really the only recourse we have. And in an ideal society, things would change when we fire the leaders that have so woefully mismanaged this country. But they don't. They haven't. Certainly for as long as I have been alive. And so that begs the question, well, if when we vote, nothing changes, what is the nature of the system that we live beneath? Because it's certainly not a democracy. It is something else entirely. I think it's more akin to a dictatorship. And it's a dictatorship of the worst imaginable type, because it is one in which our system selects for people who are prepared to take money from moneyed interests because it's not cheap to run for office, who are prepared to tell the public what they want to hear, just comfortable lies, to promise the public free money. And all these kinds of things that they do to massage us into this kind of complacency and convince us that by voting for them things will change. And yet they never do. And so, as a young person in Britain, I look at this system, I look at what it has done to my country, the country of my ancestors, and I think merely conserving or reforming this system is completely inadequate. What we need, as I said in the introduction, is a revolution. And this is no laughing matter. This is serious stuff that we're talking about here. This is the future of our country. And I do not use that word lightly, because it comes just to mind all sorts of images. But the truth of the matter is, our ruling class has become so corrupt, so rotten, that there is no solution to the malaise that this country finds itself in, other than to clear all of them out and to replace them with people who are actually going to serve the interests of the British people. Because the interests that they currently serve are not those of the British people. It is either just themselves that they serve, their own pockets, their own perception of their own status. I've met these people. I've spent time in Westminster. I have met high-power politicians. And I can tell you that these people don't care about this country. They largely, as I say, only care about themselves. They're in this business for self-serving reasons, which, when the getting is good, you can kind of tolerate. When everyone's got money, when food and fuel and electricity and gas and tax and housing are all affordable for ordinary people, in a way you can tolerate having an utterly corrupt, self-interested ruling class. But when the getting isn't good, which is increasingly the case in this country, I know I am feeling the squeeze at the moment, as I'm sure many of you are, suddenly these things are brought into sharp relief. And suddenly many of us are questioning everything we think we know about the system that we live beneath, because it is becoming increasingly nakedly obvious that our ruling class is not just uninterested in serving the interests of the vast bulk of British people, but they're actively positioned against those interests. They're actively seeking, it seems to me, to undermine and destroy everything that this country is. And that brings me to the next layer of this decline that I am describing. And this is one which, like the others, is immediately evident to all of us, every day, no matter where you are in the country now. It wasn't always that way, but certainly in the last few years, this has become the case. And that is the fact that our government has taken it upon itself to replace our people, to replace the native population of this country with people from elsewhere. And certainly for my entire life, we've been told that this is a good thing, that this is a beautiful thing, in fact, that this is something that makes our country better, because it was boring and grey and dull before. Exactly. But when I look at the footage that I often look at, being the sad sack I am, of Britain before I was born, even the 1990s, I see a country that I don't recognise. I see a country that I never got to experience. I mean, being a child of the early 21st century, I got to see the last afterglow of that civilization. But I never really experienced it in its fullness. And I look at those images and at those videos, which sure, you can say that's a rose-tinted version of that time, because there were plenty of problems then, and I can absolutely believe that. But they weren't problems of the order that we experience now in this country. They weren't problems as fundamental as the ones...
problems.
Yes. They weren't as fundamental as the ones we face now. Because at the core of our ruling class's belief system, insofar as they have one, many of them don't. Many of them believe in nothing apart from serving their own interests. But for the section that do believe in something, embodied of course in the figure of Tony Blair, this is a belief that what makes Britain great is not the people, not the British people. It is a set of abstract ideas that can be, crystallized like some kind of corporate slogan, which if people who come here adopt, everything will be the same, everything will be great. But this is so self-evidently not the case, because Britain is not great because of some abstract set of ideas. It is great because the British people are great. And so when you remove the British people from Britain, Britain ceases to be. And that is the chapter that we're living through. I never thought that I would be a political activist when I was growing up. I had no desire to do this kind of work. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't do it, if we don't stand up and do this, nobody is going to. And this country will slip quietly into the night with not even a whimper. Because this layer of the decline that I'm describing, the mass immigration that we have been subject to without democratic consent for decades, is so fundamentally transforming and ruining our country that it's almost beyond words. Because there is, of course, the damage that's already been done. There is the fact that many of our towns and cities are now unrecognisable. I know certainly that my hometown of Ashford, not far from here, has been, certainly the town centre. Because you walk around the town centre now, and this is partly due to immigration, but it's also partly due to this management that I've been talking about. You walk through the high street of Ashford, and it's like this in a great number of our towns and cities. And it's like something out of a post-apocalyptic dystopian film. If it's not obvious fronts for foreign organised crime, like your Turkish barbers and vape shops and American candy shops and all this nonsense. If it's not that, then it's a generic American chain, or it's just a boarded up shop front. That is the Britain that we are now living in. And that is the Britain that those younger than myself are getting to know. And it's hard to love a country that feels so shabby. It's hard to love a country that feels so lost and so at war with itself. But the ideal of this country, what this country could be, once was, and could be again, is an ideal so high, so glorious, that it is worth striving towards, in my opinion. And so that's why I do the work that I do. And I think that's why all of you are here tonight, because I'm sure you had far better things to be doing on a Tuesday evening than coming out here, as nice as this pub is. It's a beautiful room. That's why we're all here, is because we have this sense that if we don't do this, if we don't stand up and do our part in saving this country, or at least drawing it back from the abyss, the precipice upon which it currently teeters, then nobody will. And I can tell you for a fact that the types in Westminster, who we can broadly categorise as the political establishment, they're not going to do it. As I've said already, they and their interests, and the interests that they serve, are oriented directly against the kind of vision of Britain that I am talking about tonight, which I think we will hold in our mind's eye as being the kind of country that we want to live in and that we want to raise our children and grandchildren in. And that brings me to the final layer of this crisis that we are living through. And that is the fact that we have forgotten who we are as a people. We've forgotten what made us great. We have forgotten our character. We've become unserious. We've become anxious. We've become complacent. We've become, I think, slightly pathetic. What people would allow what's been done to us to happen if they were not, at some level, atrophied and weak? We've been very clear from the beginning that we are not in the business of telling the British public comfortable lies about where we are as a country. And it has to be acknowledged that as much as we are governed by a ruling class that does not care about us and which is actively pursuing interests against our own, it is us who has allowed this to happen, ultimately. And that is why it is so heartening to see such energy and enthusiasm around Restore Britain. Because Restore Britain is the centre of gravity around which the patriotically minded people of this country, who do feel that it is their duty to stand up before things become beyond the point of no return in this country. Restore Britain is the home for those people. It is the vehicle for those people. Because we are a political party, but we're not, ironically, about party politics. We're not doing this because of some arbitrary loyalty to a brand, or because we want to wear a specifically coloured rosette, or be associated with a certain organisation that has a certain pedigree, and all of this sort of thing. Which, as I've said already, is the reason that many people in the political establishment get into politics in the first place. We are the party for people who know that what is coming is going to be difficult and painful, and it's going to demand a great deal of all of us. It's going to demand sacrifice. But it is a party for those people who recognise that that sacrifice is worth it. Because this country was great, is great, still, if you have the eyes to see it, and will be great again if we win. Thank you very much.